My mom and my dad.
Your mom and dad?
My mom and my dad.
Okay.
So you called the police, but at that point, you had already decided
We had decided not
you weren't going
to.
to say anything.
We had decided that our feeling was not, we'll just explain what happened and it'll be okay. We were very stunned, and we felt that we would go to jail, obviously, and it was a selfish reason to just not want to have to go through that.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Oh, okay. How is everybody? You guys doing all right? Wanted to talk today about the Menéndez brothers and what looks like has been a very successful Netflix campaign to free them. And it looks like we are awaiting DA George Gascon to make an announcement as to what his office is doing. Now, if you haven't been following the coverage on this channel, George Gascon is hugely important to this, okay? So why is he so important to this? Well, he's the district attorney of Los Angeles, so that is the office that convicted the Menéndez brothers. And he created a review unit to review convictions that his office did and see if he can basically reverse some of these convictions. And of course, he's ideologically aligned with the idea that really nobody should do more than 20 years in prison. The Menéndez brothers have done 34 years in prison. And he is part of the restorative justice movement. This is not an Innocence Project case because there really are no grounds, although that doesn't stop the Innocence Project often. They do take on cases, although they claim they don't, where DNA would really not, solve it. They take on all sorts of cases, especially high-profile cases. I don't think anybody would call the case that is in different part of California, the Scott Peterson case. I don't think anybody would call that a DNA case, but okay, they're on that, trying to reverse that case. So he's very ideologically aligned, and it was announced that he's going to make an announcement any minute now. And why it's so important that he make this announcement now, and why I think that the announcement will be that he's going to release the Menéndez brothers, is that he is down in the polls to Nathan Hochman, who is running as an independent. Both Republicans and Democrats aligned in their absolute hatred. Only the most radical of the radical left are supporting DA Gascon. It has been such a disaster for LA. He has been unsuccessfully recalled 3 times. And if you're wondering why those were unsuccessful, is because oftentimes people throw in their money who don't even live in the city to support these district attorneys. We saw it with Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, where 70% of his support money his campaign money came from out of state. So there are big bucks pushing these, what they call criminal justice reform. But let's talk about some of George Gascon's, and we're going to talk about it in further detail later on. Some of his moves was to get rid of gun enhancements, meaning if you have a crime done with a gun, you can't tack on an enhancement for doing that crime with a gun. So crimes that are very violent done with a gun, like a burglary charge, etc., or gang charge, there goes the extra years that a prosecutor can use. It was a very useful tool, according to prosecutors, to have those gun enhancements. He got rid of that. He also got rid of the entire department that notifies victims' families when their loved ones is coming up, their loved one's killer is coming up for parole, to keep victims' families out of parole hearings, to give the convicts a better chance of getting out. And it's just also the general treatment that I've seen of this movement towards victims' families. They're obscured altogether, and we'll get into, the reason I'm late today, we'll get into that. I had to answer a query for a guest. Quite hilarious that they would think that I would want this guest on the show. We'll get to that. But let's get into it. So he's going to announce it any minute. And in addition, why I think that the Menéndez brothers are getting out is I think it's a fully orchestrated PR offensive. The family members of the Menéndez brothers are doing a press conference Wednesday. So all this is leading up to a release that everybody can celebrate. Get what I'm saying? So first comes the victims, the convict killer's family to say, we just want them released. Blah. They were terribly, blah, like their 911 call. My mom and my dad. Blah. That's my imitation of their 911 call. Who shot them? My mom and my dad. Blah. So to get the public sympathy there. And then George Gascon's going to come riding in on his white horse to free them. And it's all going to be a very carefully orchestrated PR offensive. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, we don't know. Could go the other way. But it looks like, just with the interviews, and if you watched about a couple of episodes ago, the Rosie interview, and we'll get into your comments in a second too. The Rosie interview, she says in the beginning, and I'm wondering if she's paying Mark Garagos. That guy does not come cheap, who's representing the Menéndez brothers. He's represented so many celebrities. Winona Ryder is one that I come to think of in her shoplifting. Also represented Claire Bronfman, the Seagram's heir. That's when I saw him in court for a minute and a half with Michael Avenatti. They were up to some shenanigans in that case together. So she says in the beginning of that interview, I called Mark Garagos to see if I should show up for this interview. So Mark Garagos is really working the PR, working the behind the scenes. He has, leaked out this information to the media, first with the Roy Rosello comments, then came the Roy Rosello documentary to give it more weight. I'm still looking for Roy Rosello's signed affidavit. Anybody have it? Send it to me. I'm looking for the actual sworn affidavit. Anybody can say anything they want on a documentary or to the media without penalty of perjury. So let's take a listen to what was reported today, shall we?
Good evening to you. I'm Robert Kovasnik. Colleen is off tonight. This is a story that has made its way back into the headlines in the last several weeks. We are talking about the Menéndez brothers, convicted of killing their parents inside their Beverly Hills mansion in 1989. Prosecutors argued the brothers committed the murders for their father's money, but Eric and Lyle Menéndez both say it wasn't cold-blooded murder. They were sexually abused by their dad. Now, L.A. County District
Well, if the cold-blooded killers say it. I love the way our media keeps running with this idea, like, they've always maintained their innocence. They say it was cold-blooded killing, but the convicted killers say something else. Oh, really? Do they? Why don't they just say their defense attorneys? Why don't they actually tell the truth here? Their defense attorneys say that both parents essayed them and that they were in fear for their life, that their parents were going to kill them any minute, and they argued self-defense. And they lost. And every appeals court has upheld their conviction. And a jury of their peers convicted them. End of story. And it was one of the worst crime scenes in California history.
Attorney George Gascon is reviewing new evidence in the case to determine if the brothers should continue to serve life sentences, and now in just 48 hours.
So what this means, and this is a really, I'm going to replay it, you know, I don't know how many times I'm going to replay it, because I was just saying to my boyfriend, I've played it 3 times already. Actually, probably 4 on this channel altogether, but 3 times recently. George Gascon's comments about how he formed all these former defense attorneys to run as DA with the Open Society Foundation's money. So the Open Society Foundation is George Soros's foundation. And he said he gave about a little less than $50 million, just shy of $50 million, to run all these former defense attorneys as district attorney. So the problem is when you have former defense attorneys reviewing evidence, there's no opposition, right? Because they're supposed to be representing the other side. But now they're just another wing of the defense saying, oh, this flies, this flies. That's what we saw in Adnan Syed's case, where the actual document, I believe, it's never been disputed. I put it out there and nobody's disputed it. Certainly other people have suggested it as well. So the actual filing was written by the Innocence Project students from the DA's office, meaning from Marilyn Mosby's office, who was going out on that office on fraud charges. So on her way out in Adnan Syed's case, and I know it seems like I'm talking about a different case, but it's really important to this case. On her way out, she had these Innocence Project students put up a bunch of talking points. One of them was a statement from a witness talking about Adnan Syed harassing Heyman Lee before the murder, but it was vague. It said he, but it's actually Adnan Syed. So one of the new suspects that released Adnan Syed was Adnan Syed himself. A multitude of DNA from the bottom of Heyman Lee's shoes. So if you know anything about forensics, one of the things they make you do in forensics class is test the bottom of your shoes to show you how much DNA you pick up. These are some of the new suspects, and not the shoes on her feet. No, the shoes tossed in the back of her car. And all this was presented to the court, and voila, no one's opposing it. Both sides, it's like 2 defense attorneys agreeing, here's our new evidence. It's not going to be discussed. So they've gotten this letter. They're not going to maybe say, look for an actual envelope for this letter or do any real investigation. They're just going to say, is this going to make this office look good? Can we get away with this? And it's going to benefit George Gascon hugely, because he's hoping, because the Menéndez Brothers documentary is the #1 watched thing on Netflix, more than Monsters right now. So more than the fictional series that's on Netflix about the Menéndez Brothers that is more balanced. I mean, boy, is the documentary a piece of crap, if I'm going to be honest. I mean, just awful. Innocence Fraud documentary is the biggest thing. He thinks he's going to get the votes. This will push him over the edge right before he he comes up for re-election. He's up for re-election in November. So he's trying to do this as quickly as possible.
Family members from across the country will be here in Los Angeles to update the press on the latest developments. But we're not going to wait for that. We've got the Menéndez lawyer, Mark Garagos, joining us live right now. Mark, thank you for being with us.
My pleasure.
Okay, Mark, let's start. There's an article out today. It's getting a lot of talk. It's suggesting that DA Gascon has made a decision about the case and an announcement is imminent. Separate fact from fiction for us.
Well, I think I take the DA at his word. We've been going back and forth for the last year with the DA's office on the issue of both the
Right. So he's like, yeah, I know the DA. He already knows the DA is going to free them. He just has to orchestrate it for maximum impact. This is what we're watching. We're watching a little show go on here so that the family members give their press conference so that the public will fully join in when the Menéndez brothers are released in full jubilation. That's what we're watching here. Yeah, I've been in touch. Now it's the perfect time to release them. Perfect political time for George Gascon. Remind me to tell you about that letter I got today.
Which is challenging the conviction itself and the resentencing. So two tracks. The DA has said that he's taken it seriously. He hasn't made a decision yet. I take him at his word because he's been honest with us all the way along. But one
saying George Gascon is being honest with you, what would that be like? I don't know. Saying I trust Ted Bundy. I mean, the guy is so dishonest, so untrustworthy. I mean, really the bottom of the barrel level human, in my view. So I wouldn't take him at his word. I think he knows what he's going to say. Yes, 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 and yes. Great time for me.
The family saw that press conference that the district attorney Gascon gave last week. They all took it upon themselves to fly in from all over the country. They will be here on Wednesday, and they are going to talk to the press and tell the press that they are united in asking for Eric and Lyle to be released from prison.
Okay, so let's put a pin on this because
right, the family that shows up is united. Don't ask about the relatives that aren't going to show up. Don't ask about the quiet relatives, just the relatives that show up for the press conference. It's all united. It's one united Menéndez brothers family. I talk about a Scottish case, the murder of Jodi Jones, and what is a relentless campaign to free her killer, Luke Mitchell. And the mother in that case is always out front center. You never see the brother who talk, who it would have been a great alibi witness for him. Same with, there's another case I talk about, which is Officer Faulkner's murder, Mumia Abu Jamal, or Wesley Clark. It's his first name, right? Before he changed it. And that has been going on since before I was a teen, 12, 11, maybe younger. It's, been a huge cause celeb in Pennsylvania. He even has a street named after him in Paris. But his brother, who was actually there for the crime, his shooting of Officer Faulkner, has never spoken up. And that was even when he was on death row. He was now commuted to life, but they're still trying to get him out. And recently at Brown University, they had an entire display of all of Mumia Abu Jamal's letters and correspondence. If If you've seen him on Democracy Now, they treat him as a hero, a poet, a visionary. I mean, this is what our kids are getting indoctrinated to. His cell was recreated. They recreated it for this, for this, what do you call it? Art opening? I don't know what you call it. Display of letters. Is that an art opening? What is that? Exhibition, maybe? Exhibition. They recreated his cell and brought out his letters, et cetera, at Brown. And I had that as a push against mass incarceration. You know, no one from Officer Faulkner's family was there, or his widows. It was incredible. She's an incredible, powerful spokeswoman for her murdered husband.
Because listen, we are just weeks away from the election. This could be considered a Hail Mary pass for Gascon, who's well behind in the polls, to try and make up some ground. Do you see him making a decision, making an announcement about any changes in this case before Election Day?
Well, I sure hope he does. Mind you, we had been going back and forth with the DA's office. As I said, we filed this petition in May of last year. We've done conditional examinations, which are kind of the criminal law version of a deposition. We have given them just loads of mitigation evidence. I will tell you, in fact, right behind me is the part of...
Wait. I want to go back a little bit. I missed that. They've done what? They've given them depositions that they've done, that the defense has done? Do you see what the problem is when you don't have a trial, when you no longer have a prosecutor? You just have one united defense team?
Kind of the criminal law version of a deposition. We have given them just loads.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry, guys. I just want to go back.
Criminal law version of a deposition.
Oh, sorry, guys.
This petition in May of last year. We've done conditional examinations, which are kind of the criminal...
Conditional examinations. Thank you, Mark Aragos. It's like conditional examinations. The defense team has done conditional examinations. So they're really scouring for any information that would go against their agenda, I'm sure.
Law version of a deposition. We have given them just loads of mitigation evidence. I will tell you, in fact, right behind me is the part of the cap and gown that Lyle received when he graduated from the first class ever from UC Irvine's program with the Department of Corrections. They've started programs both inside and out of in the community, the prison community. They've really done exemplary work.
So if you watch my show Sunday night where I had the prison guard, he doesn't think they should get out. He's like, they're good convicts. That's all that means. Glad they're doing well in prison. I'm glad that they're, participating in all those things. Although I wish we had free education for victims' families, certainly. But, I mean, come on. So what he's saying is I gave mitigating evidence, which means that when you're presenting mitigating things, you're like, these are mitigating factors, like things that should be brought into consideration as to who they are as people. And their whole argument is a mitigating factor. We did it because, and where the lie in this is that we did this because we were SA'd by both our parents. So this is really getting obscured by our media that's saying, oh, it was just Jose. And because of Roy Rosello's alleged affidavit that I can't find anywhere, only can find media articles written about it. And I just find his story very weird. I'm sorry. I don't want to disbelieve anybody who said they were through a horrible experience. But don't you think it's weird? I mean, just because I'm from that area, around that area, to say that I was in New York, I met Jose Menéndez in New York, and he took me in his limo all the way back to the house. And the whole reason that the Menéndez brothers had to kill Kitty, according to Jerome Oziel, the psychiatrist who Eric confessed to, was because Kitty was a witness. Like was never away from Jose. According to the secretary, she was constantly calling and asking what he wanted for dinner, very much in touch. Like she was never apart from him. So instead of, say, getting a hotel room and doing this Bill Cosby that, I mean, I'm just trying to put it, I'm not trying to be glib. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just trying to put it into YouTube-friendly terms. He takes them in his limousine all the way to Princeton, New Jersey, which is like an hour, 15-minute limo drive, and does a Bill Cosby. Like, what, Kitty's not going to be there? Where's Kitty? How was he returned? I don't know. I have to listen to the documentary and the whole thing. Just that little detail seems so odd. Does anyone else find that odd? I'm a big multi-millionaire executive, but I want to take you in my limo to New Jersey? I mean, I certainly find the timing very odd of the release of this confession. I mean, this would have been so explosive had he done it when the trial was all the rage and all the news.
And I'm hoping that I think, frankly, that the DA has taken a brave step by reacting last week to being inundated by the press. Remember what happened here. He was, because of that show that was put out, Monsters, there was a backlash against that. I mean, I think you probably seen it. There were a lot of people who did not like the caricature that was made,
including the brothers. So, Mark, I'm going to rapid fire.
The killers didn't like it. And yet, I covered a show, and I didn't, this was a dilemma for me. I believe it was called, I'd gotten a PR release, and I love the documentary this director did right before this. So I said yes. It was Taken in Plain Sight. Has anyone seen that documentary? It's excellent. Very pro-victim documentary. So I was not expecting what Dead Asleep was. Hold on one second, guys. So I was not expecting Dead Asleep to be what it was. And I was like, and not only that, so I was really disappointed when I thought, well, I can ask some skeptical or some tough questions. I decided to still go ahead with it. But at that time, the victim's sister was speaking out and saying, nobody cover this. And so I was in a real dilemma. But I thought it was better to and I thought nobody else is going to ask these questions, to have this director on and ask them. But that was the victim's family. That certainly didn't slow that documentary down when the victim's family objected to it. But now the killer's family objects to Monsters. It's like, stop the press. Let me inundate the DA's office. And not only is he going to be inundated, George Gascon, the DA of Los Angeles, by the press, he's going to be inundated by all the TikTokers and all the gullible people. And TikTok is really perfect for innocence fraud because it can make arguments in very tiny sound bites. So all the context can easily be edited out of it. And any kind of skepticism, you just kind of get like, what do you call it? Like washed over with these arguments really like quickly and powerfully and in this really easily to digest way. So it's perfect if you want to do innocence fraud campaign for guilty killers. TikTok.
You really quickly because we're running out of time. First of all, what do Lyle and Eric have to say about all of this that's going down right now? Quickly.
They're cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic. This all hinges on a letter that Lyle wrote to, a smoking gun, if you will, that Lyle wrote to, Eric wrote to his cousin about confirming, corroborating that his father was sexually abusing him just 9 months before their parents were killed. So
he says that's what it is. The defense team says. We also know that Lyle's letters were intercepted. I believe they were to at least one cousin asking them to lie for him about this. So is this what Eric was doing? And I went back and I watched, I think it was on a rewatched Dominic Dunn, Power, Privilege, and Justice on this case. And boy, is it excellent. I'm sure the Menéndez brothers hate it. But it shows you the difference between the first trial and the second trial, how it was pared down and how Lyle didn't take the stand. Second trial, Dominic Dunn's talking about being in the courtroom. He was one of 10 journalists in the courtroom for the first trial and how he had tears in his eyes. And Dominic Dunn was not a supporter of the Menéndez brothers from the get-go. He saw them at the memorial service and he looked at Lyle, not Eric. He said Lyle was just too cocky. And he thought to himself, he did it. This is when the Menéndez brothers were moving from hotel room to hotel room with bodyguards, etc., to avoid this mob hit that might be after them. Which seems to be a pattern with guilty killers. Like Amanda Knox used to say this, it could have been me. It could have happened to me. I could have been next. Wendy Adelson, are they going to come after me? Are they going to come after the boys? Do I need protection? And here are the Menéndez brothers, same thing.
that is really the linchpin in the new evidence, yes or no?
That, along with a declaration by Roy Rosella, who was a member of Menudo and has now put in a declaration under penalty of perjury that he too was assaulted sexually.
So is this a declaration under penalty of perjury, etc., by Jose Menéndez? Where is it? Where is it? I'm looking for it. If anybody has it, send it to me, robertaclass23@gmail. I'm looking for it. Looking for the actual document.
Point and the purpose.
Also looking for the trial transcripts of the second trial.
Purpose of you and the family getting together with this news conference on Wednesday, is it to put pressure on the DA? Yes or no?
I would say it's more to give him wind at his back that, look, you've.
There it is. There you go, guys. It's more to give him wind at on his back. He knows he's releasing him. It's to give him wind at his back. So when he releases them, we want to make sure that the public is properly propagandized to join in jubilation when they're released. He's saying it. How else can you interpret that? Wind at his back. There's no question in my mind that I've watched a lot of these innocence fraud campaigns. I predicted the minute I saw Serial or listened to Serial that Adnan Syed was getting out. And I was thrilled when the Supreme Court of Maryland reaffirmed his conviction. But I thought he was going to get out on an Alfred plea. Now he's in this precarious position where he's a convicted killer walking around teaching students at Georgetown University.
We have a victims' bill of rights in California. The victims here are flying in from all over the country. They want to be heard. They believe that it's time. It's been 35 years. If these were the Menéndez,
the victims in this case, we have a victims' bill of rights. Look what George Gascon has done to victims' families. You have a victim's bill of rights that they have to be heard in court. I'd love to know the exact details. But in this case, the victims' families are also related to the killers. So it complicates things just a little bit, Mark Garagos, just a little bit. This is absurd.
as sisters, they would not be in custody.
Gotcha. And I just got to ask you really quickly, why is Rosie O'Donnell among the speakers on Wednesday?
Rosie was kind of early money on this case. Rosie, Adam Carolla.
There it is. She was early money on this case. Did he just say early money? Did I just mishear that? What did you guys hear? Go back.
Was kind of early money on this case.
So she put in her money to free these guys, and Adam Carolla too.
Rosie, Adam Carolla, recently Kim Kardashian. People have started. There's a groundswell of support.
Great. Mark Garagos, the lawyer for Eric and Lyle Menéndez, speaking to us live tonight on NBC4. Mark.
So my boyfriend just came rushing in, and he has another interpretation. What is it, honey?
Oh, he's an LA guy, and remember that movie Swingers when they were in LA and everything was money? Oh, you're so money, dude. You're so money. You can talk to that girl because you're so money. It's an LA expression.
It's an LA expression. She's not early money on this case. Is it an expression, or I think she's actually putting her money? I think she's actually
putting it.
And Adam Carolla, who's conservative. This seems to be popular with the conservatives. This is like when anybody says like this innocence fraud stuff, it certainly comes from an ideology from the left, but both the left and the right are full in on it. No one's opposing it. Everyone's like, oh, killer getting free. Let's get into it. So I think this is worth playing just to give you an idea of who George Gascon is. Here he is talking about his philosophy. Okay.
My focus from the very beginning when I became the district attorney is I've been working already at the national level for almost a decade on criminal justice reform, really with a very strong focus on reducing incarceration. That was really, at that point in my life, that was really the goal. My goal is much broader today, but, as you will see during the conversation, I'm a product of evolving, obviously. So when I became the district attorney, I believed that we could find a balance between reducing crime and community safety and reducing incarceration. I think you could do both at the same time, and we proved that you could. And that was the primary focus at the time.
Yeah, so he proved that he could also bring crime down by just not prosecuting it. Isn't that amazing? What an amazing idea. So where there are these kind of soft on crime prosecutors, crime is through the roof. And where these people go when they're released. So I was looking at Norway because of this Menéndez stuff. One of the things that Rosie said, and I can't remember if it was Eric or Lyle or both. I know that Eric has gotten into painting. And I think she said he studied the Norway model where they have like full music studios and they teach you how to rebuild cars. The inmates have a key to their cell. It's also a much less violent society, but they don't give anyone a sentence longer than 21 years. So they have one killer there who killed 77 people, and he comes up for parole at 21 years. Anyway, I mean, it's like a country club in there, really. I mean, the coffee bar, you know, they interview this, like, they don't say he was a killer in the first piece, but by the second piece where he's featured, I found out he was a killer. Just a killer sitting there, you know, in the coffee bar. He has, like, I think there's like one or two guards to every inmate in the Norwegian model. And they have a 20% recidivism rate. So they're like, this would be great for America. It costs $90,000. That's when this piece was done a couple of years ago. So now it's more, almost $100,000 a year per inmate. It's so expensive to do this kind of program. But we have between a 60 and 70% recidivism rate in America. That is nuts. So chances are, just statistically, if you're going to release someone, they're going to reoffend. Okay, so here he is talking about the Open Society money that he took. And for those that got this the first couple times I played it, forgive me, but I really think it's important that people know what the plan was. So it's really not being discussed into how it relates to these releases of these criminals. So when Adnan Syed got released, everyone was like, well, the prosecutor was behind it. Well, it's a soft on crime prosecutor who's put in that position just to do that. So they thought up this plan, they looked at a map, and it doesn't take much money to really move a DA campaign forward. So they put $50 million all over the country into these DA races. Chesaboudin was one in San Francisco. He got recalled. That was another disaster. Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, Larry Krasner in Philadelphia. But here he is talking about how he took Open Society Foundation money, which is George Soros's foundation, and thought of a plan to run former defense attorneys as district attorney in an effort to eliminate the role of prosecutor altogether and just to have two defense attorneys talk to themselves in court.
We literally started looking at the map of the U.S. and we were trying to identify strategically what are the urban centers where is anybody that could be considered a progressive prosecutor. You know, there were a couple of people that have been nibbling in some areas, but we just couldn't find one. So one of the conversations was then, how do we go about creating a movement here, which actually eventually led to Open Societies Foundation, which is George Soros Foundation, putting almost $50 million in 2014 through the ACLU to begin the movement. And, you know, people like Larry Krasner and others came to my office while they were running for office. In some cases, we identified people to run for office. And then many would come in after getting elected. They send their people in. So, like, for instance, Larry's number 2, at one point spent almost a month going in and out of my office.
Okay, there we go. So that was George Gascon, who's the district attorney of Los Angeles. He's now down in the polls against Nathan Hochman, an independent running against him. His reign as DA has been filled with scandals, corruption scandals. He has, we're going to talk about it a little bit more later, 50 plus lawsuits from prosecutors in his office, some arguing retaliatory transfer or retaliatory dismissal. Of course, John Lewin, DA John Lewin, who I've interviewed, I've done so many episodes with him on this show. I'm going to listen to him talk about it in a little bit, what life under George Gascon's policy is like. So this is no surprise. They're getting ready for a big, in my view, this is how I see it, big PR offensive. But before I go any further, let's get into your comments from last episode about the Menéndez brothers.
We got your comments. You had something to say. You were insightful. Oh, so clever. So Roberta's going to read your comments. Hey, Roberta, read those comments.
Okay, number 1 from Beth Ryan. 9077 says, during Eric's testimony, he said many relatives were at the house after the murders and the grandmother was going through his parents' bedroom. He said that he had already found gay magazines and videos in his father's cupboard. He said that he had put those things in his own cupboard so the relatives didn't find it and think badly of his father. So thoughtful of him, right, Beth? LOL. Next, when he was arrested, he got off the plane. Many months later, he called his cousin and asked him to get that same stuff out of his cupboard of his apartment and get rid of it all. I mean, is he gay? Yep. And to that, the lies continue. Yeah, he's married now. But I guess, I know that California, Lyle is getting conjugal visits. And I know Eric's in the same prison. I wonder how that works with his wife, but okay. I know Lyle has had a divorce because he cheated on in prison on his first wife. I mean, they're just so, let's talk about their robbing spree, their burglary spree, where they were just cleaning out their Beverly Hills neighbors' houses. And Eric took the fall because he was 18, Lyle was 20. Jose very foolishly convinced Eric to take the fall and then paid off some of the victims for the stuff that wasn't returned. That was right before the murder. So they were 18 and 21. I lose my mind when they're referred to as boys. That was certainly something that was done by Leslie Abramson, Eric Menendez's lawyer, to dress Eric and Lyle Menéndez up in inoffensive pastel sweaters to make them look non-menacing and gentle, and collared preppy shirts. And she would kind of like smooth out their sweaters and put her arm around them. Same thing she did with Phil Spector. She walked into court with him arm in arm. I've shown the footage. Don't think I need to show it again. Little Tex chick says, a lot of disgusting things about the aftermath were reported in the LA Times. Besides the descriptive details of the carnage was the fact that the coroner was given an umbrella to enter the home. Just imagine that. It was raining in the home, not water anyway. That was their parents. Makes the hair on the back of your neck stick up or your stomach turn. Either one, you take your pick. I don't buy the abuse scenario at all. Their acting and fake crying was over the top. Yeah, I didn't buy it. And I've watched a lot of testimony in this area. It doesn't ring true. It doesn't ring true to me. Perplexed bystander 6203 says, I have concerns about whether the brothers would prove dangerous if released. S-word abuse is repugnant. I can't judge if they suffered that way or not. I'm fed up saying they were little boys, though they were old enough to vote. Kimmy Freak says, why would a brutal, manipulative, scheming sociopath who inherited a F ton of money run to the most untrustworthy therapist to confess? and cry about it too. Sociopaths don't care. They move on because they lack remorse. Or maybe he had a big mouth and wanted to talk and wanted some help. We assume that's because he has remorse. Maybe he wanted some help on how to cover it up. Maybe he didn't see him, certainly painted by the defense, and had some sleazy practices like dating his client, Jude Smith, Jerome Oziel. Certainly painted as the devil, but he was also painted by the devil by the defense because he was one of the most damaging witnesses. Eric confessed to him. And then after Eric told Lyle, he was like, yep, we're going to have to kill him. We like to put these kind of like logical, rational thinking or human, kind of very humane thinking on these killers. Like, why would OJ kill his wife? And why would he kill another, why would he kill Goldman, right when he's leaving for a trip? You just run and he said, I have some killing to do before I hop on a plane. That's not logical. Killing is not logical. It's not rational. But I don't think you can say because he confessed to the therapist, he's remorseful. Listen to him talk. Look at his demeanor in court. See if you see real emotion anywhere. And the reason why this abuse excuse is so pushed is it is to give normalcy to their flat affect and their blasé attitude towards their crime. Oh, they're just damaged. Come on, they're just damaged people. We don't understand. But we like to think that these killers work in logical, rational steps. They don't. Jebby Camphor, thanks for the super sticker. I appreciate it. Especially these episodes. I'll tell you, it is a struggle. It's a struggle to keep these kind of episodes monetized. Certainly, anytime that you have an opinion that is not the majority opinion on any subject and is in fact an opinion that goes against an ideology that is being pushed, it is very easy for YouTube to say that it is not, to label it not advertiser friendly. That's all I'm going to say. And this channel, certainly, it's a constant battle. So, what did I want to show? Oh, the letter I got today. I thought I'd share this with you. So, I get these like PR letters for people to come on the show. So I got one today. Hey, Roberta, the controversial execution of Marcellus Williams in Missouri, despite compelling DNA evidence pointing to his innocence, has ignited a national debate about the fallibility of the death penalty. The execution took place on September 24th, 2024, with growing public support for Williams's clemency in his final days. The case underscores a significant flaw, how easily the justice system can fail when critical new evidence is overlooked. Criminal defense attorney Brett Rosen, a staunch advocate for defendants' constitutional rights, is uniquely positioned to offer expert insight into this urgent issue. Brett Rosen is one of the youngest attorneys to be certified by the New Jersey Supreme Court as a criminal trial attorney, an accolade given to less than 1% of lawyers in the state. He has built a reputation for securing victories in complex cases that others deemed unwinnable. Okay, I'm going to just skip forward. Oh, his commitment to protecting the marginalized and defending against prosecutorial overreach has made him one of the top criminal defense attorneys in the region. Rosen is ready to discuss how the Williams case exemplifies the need for reform to prevent wrongful executions. With his extensive trial experience and knowledge of the justice system's failing, particularly in cases involving DNA evidence. Oh, isn't that shocking that he wants to make every case a DNA case? All right. It's not like the Innocence Project doesn't have the same exact MO. He can offer critical insights into the broader issues facing capital punishment. Reach out for an interview with Brett to explore this critical topic. Okay, so I wrote back. So to the PR woman's name was Krista. I said, Krista, I'm very familiar with William's murder of Felicia Gale. Gale's name, along with the detail of William's crime, is entirely missing from your 3-paragraph pitch. Humanizing the victim is so inconvenient when you have to paint a vicious killer who laid in wait for Gale as she showered before brutally stabbing her 43 times with a knife into an innocent victim of a criminal justice system run amok. I'm happy to have Mr. Rosen come on my program for a respectful discussion of the facts, not the lies the Innocence Project has thrown out for the gullible public's consumption. Does Mr. Rosen want to talk about the fact that Gale's purse, including ID and coin purse and other of her possessions, were found in the killer's backpack? Or does Mr. Rosen want to discuss the confession Gale's killer gave to his girlfriend, Laura Azario? Doesn't Mr. Rosen find it odd that Azario strangely noticed blood on Felicia Gale's killer's clothing and scratches on the killer's neck before he confessed to her? How about the testimony from the man who bought Gale's stolen laptop from Gale's killer? Or does Mr. Rosen want to talk about the killer's cellmate, who said Felicia Gale's murderer confessed to the murder after a news story came on the TV while the killer was in lockup for another crime? He racked up 24 felony convictions before he murdered Gale. Maybe Mr. Rosen wants to discuss why they thought this was a case appropriate for DNA testing. Felicia Gale's killer was not convicted on DNA's testing. Spoiler alert, the DNA that was said to have proved Gale's killer's innocence belonged to the prosecutor from handling the knife in court. So, yes, Mr. Welcome is welcome to come on my podcast if he wants to have a civil debate. I think it's only fair that I disclose that I deeply oppose the narrative that Mr. Rosen is spinning. Felicia Gale's killer was not marginalized. He had the backing of the multi-million-dollar wrongful conviction movement. I would say multi-billion, if you include all of it. And the benefit of the Innocence Project's lawyers and PR machine. It takes a lot of money and a lot of omitting of facts to turn a violent psychopath into a cause celeb. If Mr. Rosen wants to abolish the death penalty, I suggest he argue the subject on its own merits instead of becoming a mouthpiece for the release of a lifelong offender and a dangerous, unrepentant killer. I'm attaching some of the court record, which refutes the narrative put out in your press release that critical new evidence was overlooked. I've spoken to some PR reps who joke that they lie for a living. However, I would hope no one in your profession, including you, Krista, would aim to have a career spinning falsehoods for the truly dangerous men in our society who butcher us. I know you can do better. Sincerely, Roberta Glass. I mean, what? I guess I'm just on a list, but come on, guys. Really? I mean, even after the execution went on, they're going to keep pushing this. Like, we're not happy until Marcellus Williams is fully a myth. So there's more from Garagos. Let's take a listen.
our top headlines this week was the case of Lyle and Eric Menéndez, the brothers. The two were convicted for the 1989 murder of their parents in Beverly Hills. But now the LA District Attorney is reviewing new evidence in the case.
The Menéndez brothers captured the world's attention for decades, and the fascination with this case started back in the 80s.
On August 20th, 1989, Jose and Kitty Menéndez were found shot and killed in their Beverly Hills mansion. Less than a year later, Lyle Menéndez was arrested and Eric surrendered to Los Angeles police. It was believed that the boys killed their parents for their inheritance.
When the trial began for 4 years later in 1993, it was a media field day. The Menéndez brothers emotionally described years of sexual abuse by their parents. They argued that they killed their parents in self-defense.
But the jury was deadlocked and it ended in a mistrial. In 1995, the second trial began.
And a year later, Lyle and Eric are convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
Now, fast forward to last year when the brothers filed a motion seeking a new hearing based on new evidence. And that brings us to today.
Joining us live is criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos, who's representing the brothers. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.
See, now they don't really have to have a hearing, right? They don't have to have a new trial. They don't have to have any testing of the evidence. So the reason why our justice system works as well as it does, it's not perfect. Certainly anything that has human involved has, is prone to error. There's no perfect thing. I think it is one of the best in the world, however, and I think that these claims of what the Innocence Project is claiming for wrongful convictions. I just invite everyone to read the transcripts of some of these great exonerations and wrongful convictions. Don't take my word. Do your research. Look into it. Find the transcripts, not just the appeals documents from the defense. Get into the original trial transcripts. Go over them. And come back and see if you think that they were innocent or wrongfully convicted. There certainly have been wrongful convictions. Russ Ferrara is one of them, Michael Morton, but I would say that they are very few and far between, as far as, the amount of, I've been talking about this subject and researching this subject for 7 years. Probably going on 8 now. And people, will say, oh, she never thinks anyone's innocent, blah, blah, blah. But send me the actual court transcripts of great cases. And why I don't talk about wrongful convictions on this podcast is I feel like it's very covered. It's more than covered on every other true crime podcast. It's like you have to have a few wrongful conviction cases to be popular. This is like the crack cocaine to Americans. We love wrongful conviction stories.
Let's get straight into it, Mark. Take us back to when you first got involved in the case. What gave you confidence that this could all be turned around?
Well, about 2 years ago, I was talking with Cliff Gardner. Cliff is the appellate lawyer who was representing them back in 2005. And he had pointed out to me not only the letter that was found, there was a letter that Eric had written to his cousin Andy, and Andy tragically passed away about 20 years ago. The letter is dated about 8 months prior to the killings. So it shows, and he goes into horrible detail about the abuse that he's suffering at the hands of his father. So you combine that along with, there was a documentary that came out that also there was another victim, now one of the members of the boy band Menudo. And I thought, and as Cliff thought, boy, those, if anything ever called for a reexamination of this conviction, that would be it.
There is a lot of curiosity when it comes to this new evidence coming to light, and obviously the DA playing a major role in all of this. Can you talk about the evidence and also what the DA's team is doing at this point in time?
Well, there's the DA, I thought, made a very brave move by coming out so close, if you will, to the election and saying he is re-examining it. I will tell you that for the last...
Brave? He took a brave move, something that was made hugely popular by TikTok. And how much do you want to bet he's looking for the young person's vote? How much do you want to bet? It's a little weak in the young person's vote. He made this brave move to pick something that's hugely popular right now and hugely propagandized and joining behind it right before an election. Oh, and I just want to know who's paying Mark Garagos. When did he appear on the scene? It seems like right around the time that Rosie O'Donnell got on it. She hired Mark Garagos, and she's going to appear in it, and I bet she's going to cry too. How much do you want to bet she's going to cry at this press conference Wednesday? My money's on Rosie crying. I hope she doesn't hear that. She's not going to hear this. I don't think I have to worry about her hearing this, but I bet she's going to cry.
Year and a half, we filed what's called a habeas corpus, which is a challenge to the conviction. About 3 months ago, because of a change in the law here in California, we also sent them over what's called a petition for resentencing. So we've got basically two tracks that we're going down. We're challenging the conviction. We're also saying, hey, Mr. DA, these two gentlemen, the brothers, are perfect candidates for resentencing. They've been in...
See how he says that? Hey, Mr. DA. Hey, other side. Hey, tough on crime DA. Hey, hard-nosed DA. Hey, former cop DA, who happens to also be Cuban, just like the Menéndez brothers, just like Jose Menéndez was. Isn't that interesting? You might want to free your fellow Cubans here. And it might be good for your conviction. Your election conviction. Election should be convicted.
Custody now for over 35 years. They've done tremendous work both on themselves and in the prison community. And if there was ever anybody who under the...
Leslie had the greatest statement. Jill Argos is asking, where's Leslie? Leslie had the greatest statement, which is like, look, the courts... see, this is the thing behind a wrongful conviction. Leslie said the courts spoke. No amount of... very naive. Either she's naive, but I don't think she's naive. She knows these things work. She has to know they work. She's like, no amount of petitions will release some of that. It can only happen from our courts, but our courts don't work in a vacuum. Serial, 100% released Adnan Syed. Without Serial, Adnan Syed would not be released. Julius Jones, the only reason the last defense... So these Innocence Project lawyers produced their own propaganda, and it was aired on ABC, The Last Defense. Also propaganda for Darlie Routier, another Innocence Project case. But at the end of The Last Defense for Julius Jones, they said, we just have to test this bandana for DNA, and we can see who the real killer is. Well, guess what? The DNA comes back, and it has Julius Jones's DNA on it. Does that stop the Innocence Project? Does the Innocence Project walk away? No, they just double down. Same thing happened with the Kevin Cooper case, the Rodney Reed case. They don't walk away from their client when the DNA comes back with their client's DNA. They just double down. So Leslie Abramson said, like, only the courts can do it. So when I talk about wrongful convictions being not happening as often as the Innocence Project says they happen, it's just logic. Not saying they never happen. I'm just saying they're very, very rare. The police have to be wrong. The detectives have to be wrong. The prosecutor has to be wrong. The jury has to be wrong. The appeals courts have to be wrong. If you look at Russ Farrar's case, who was set up like literally set up. That's how that wrongful conviction happened. He got out fairly quickly, and he was writing the Innocence Project all the time from prison. They wanted nothing to do with this
State
case.
of California law should be released. These are the two who should be released.
So what are the possible outcomes then if there's these two tracks? I mean, does this go back to court?
Right. Release these two rich, greedy kids who have the most help, the biggest PR. And we've made flying monkeys and minions out of all these gullible young women with too many feelings.
For resentencing, or can the DA just decide, hey, let's just release them?
Everything has to be ultimately blessed by the judge, and it depends on which track we go down. But the DA could decide, and I think what the DA should decide is, look, they've been in custody 35 years. I've often said, if Eric's name was Erica, Lyle would have been a hero, and if they were the Menéndez sisters, they would not be in custody.
Are you kidding? They would have been so hated if they had been the Menéndez sisters. They went on the same spending spree. They would be more hated. Oh, the Menéndez sisters went on a $700,000, which is essentially, in today's money, a $1.78 million spending spree in the months after the murders before they were arrested. Hey, Maui Swift, nice to see you. You say Woke Nation. I don't know if you got to listen to Sunday's show. I was playing the STS. Thanks for asking the STS interview with the prison guard. And thank you for asking like maybe the one skeptical question asked in that episode. Like, hey, how did this Rosello letter get there? Was anyone offered anything? Was a payment offered? Nice to hear your name come up in that episode, Maui.
Society has evolved over the last 35 years. We now recognize what we could not accept back then. And if there is any justice, what I would argue that the DA should do is ask the judge to recall the sentence, basically say, I'm going to recall the murder sentence. I'm going to recall the life without parole. I'm going to sentence you now to a manslaughter. And they've done the maximum amount of time on manslaughter.
Let's also talk about the reaction here. What are the brothers saying about this new hearing? How are they reacting? And how are family members taking all of this?
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that, because one of the reasons that we filed or gave them the draft petition for resentencing is 24 of the family members, both sides, Kitty's, Jose's, the siblings, nephews, nieces, cousins, all of them, save maybe one or two, 24, all signed a letter saying, hey, we want them out as well.
Right. And the one or two that aren't going along with the family cult, that's all like, we can't bring Jose and Kitty back, but Lyle and Eric are still alive and they deserve the rest of their life. The ones that wouldn't be guilted into signing this. You're not going to hear or see them, the one or two. I wonder if it really is one or two. This guy's a regular Billy Flynn, isn't he? From Chicago, like a silver-tongued attorney. What a wordsmith.
That is basically unheard of. In my 40 years of practice, I've never had kind of a phalanx of victims.
Really? He's never had a bunch of victims who were strangely related to the killers? I've never had the victim's family fully support the killer's release. Let's just not talk about the fact that they're all related to the killers, too. They're related to both. Can't bring back Kitty and Jose. Gotta just release the Menéndez brothers.
Victims who have all...
You know, I mean, if I told my younger self that in however many years, I don't even want to say I'm getting so old, I would be sitting here talking about don't release the Menéndez brothers. They're guilty, greedy, creepy, untrustworthy. bottom of the barrel humans. I mean, I probably would have, you could have knocked me over with a feather. All I remember is, watching the first trial and just being in awe of Leslie Abramson's power and in theatrics. It got me into trials. I was mesmerized. And then I was reading Dominic Dunn's coverage, and that just taught me the power of the written word. When I felt like, I was watching parts of and by the behind the scenes too of the trial. All his coverage it's like candy, so juicy the way he covers trials. He covered trials and always with a very strong moral center. We don't have that. We don't really have, I guess you could say Nancy Grace is the closest thing, but she's not a writer. I mean, we don't have true crime coverage like that anymore. We have some very good local coverage, but not our national coverage is the pits.
Signed on to say enough is enough, we want them out.
Wow. Well, a couple of days ago, you said there's a chance that they could be free before Thanksgiving. I mean, is that really possible?
It is, actually. The DA said that he planned on, I saw one of the interviews he did, said that Mr. Gascon said that he was, the buck would stop with him. He will make the decision. There is dissent in that office. There's still a couple of people around in that office who, want to try.
Well, George Gascon, as you're going to see in a few, doesn't do very well with dissent. He has a few people to fire in that office who dissent to that opinion. I mean, who do we have? Who do we have in true crime who's really speaking up about from a victim's point of view, or a little bit more of who's not joining in on on these innocence fraud narratives? I don't know if you guys heard when I played Amanda Knox's podcast where she was asking guests that I had on talk about who wrote about Adnan Syed's guilt and how he got released. I mean, I thought Andrew Hamill is his name. And she asked him, "Oh, are you part of this innocence fraud movement?" There is no movement, Amanda. I wish there was a movement. I wish more people were talking about it. It's massive. There's so much money. So someone asked about how do they make money with the documentaries? So documentaries are cheap to make. You don't pay generally. It's frowned upon to pay the participants in it. And then you sell it to these platforms. And then I believe, I don't know how it breaks down as far as views, and if you get I assume you get portions every time it airs. So if, you're depending on your part of it, but it's hugely profitable. I mean, the West Memphis 3 had 3 of them. No, they had more. They had 4. Am I forgetting one? I think they had 4 documentaries. The last one was produced by the paroled killer himself, Damien Eccles. So they're hugely profitable, cheap to make. And also they further an ideological agenda. A lot of people think that this is the way to prison reform. Get rid of long sentences, do more what they have in Europe, but we don't have really a society. I don't know what the answer is. I haven't studied it extensively. I just know that a lot of the stuff we did as far as reform and rehabilitation, we always seem to end up in the same place, back at high crime. If it worked, I wouldn't, I don't know how I'd feel. I don't know. It's a larger topic, one that I have not fully. I have my hands full just reviewing all the transcripts of these famous exonerations. I'm one person and making my podcast.
Uphold the conviction for reasons of their own. But I think that the right thing to do, that the fair thing and the just thing to do is get them home, and I'll have them over for Thanksgiving dinner.
Yeah, I guess only time will tell how this all plays out. Very fascinating to see all of this. There's obviously a lot of buzz about the Netflix series going on. There is also a new documentary coming out this week. Do these projects help your case or do they hurt it?
Well, I will tell you, I'm glad you asked that. There is almost a boomerang effect with the monsters, Ryan Murphy.
What a bummer. What a bummer. What a bummer. We finally have like a series that tells some of the truth. I haven't watched all of it, but I can see some of Dominic Dunn's reporting, at least in what I have watched of it. I think it tells more of the truth or more of the essence of the way I see this story. And now they have a boomerang effect because these people have been propagandized by a million young women on TikTok going, I just feel sorry, blah, they're victims.
Series that came out, and Eric was very vocal specifically about the characterization or caricature of Lyle. And there has been a sea change in the the age group, if you will, that is driving a reexamination of this. I can't tell you the number of kids or grandkids of people that I know that have been texting me saying, free the Menendezes.
Right, because when you're that age, death, you do not understand what a brutal murder is. You do not understand what a dangerous killer is. You do not understand what a psychopath is. You don't understand what a crime like this is and the huge waves of destruction it causes. And I can say I was like that. You don't really understand that. All you see is the people in front of you. You don't think I could be Kitty, I could be Jose. You think they were bad people who got what they deserved. And everything about the defense team did was to further that narrative. So yeah, these are all, and they have no BS meter. They haven't lived life. And that is also who is very affected by the wrongful conviction movement. They also don't understand our justice system. They think it moves very quickly. Mistakes can't be ironed out. And that forget the justice system. Let's get a TikTok campaign, or forget having Rosello cross-examined. He's already told his truth in a documentary. Never mind it's edited. Never mind it's practiced, or it could be practiced or rehearsed. He says he's a victim. The victims should be believed. And I don't disagree with that all the time. But when you're talking about it, a testimony, you're basing someone's testimony on releasing two killers that a court and a judge who saw all the evidence, jury, sentenced them to life, gave them. I think that cross-examination is the least of what we should do. Examine this evidence. Examine where this letter came from. My mind, it looks like something that was written by Eric from prison to his cousin to tell him how to lie on the stand. Strangely, Cano was the main witness about the abuse, and he gets a letter all about the abuse. When and it tells where it happened. It happened at night in my room. And that Lyle doesn't know, like he's got to know who knows what. Very clever. What the Dominic Dunn's documentary says is that Eric was really the mastermind and the smart one.
And what happened was the backlash against that monster series, I think, inundated the DA's office and others. And I don't think anybody truly understood just how evolved we have become as a culture to understand now that male-on-male abuse can happen, that a father can abuse his sons. I mean, it was ridiculed back in the 90s.
It was not ridiculed. The Menéndez brothers were ridiculed because of their shopping spree. Because everything pointed to greed. There was so much evidence of their greed. But thanks to you and your PR offensive, you've made their shopping spree and their burglaries just products of their abuse. They were broken people, guys. They were broken people. So I wanted to share with you. I hope you guys are ready for a long one tonight. I wanted to share with you DA Lewin, John Lewin, who's known as the king of the cold cases. He's one of the winningest prosecutors in his county, winning the hardest cases, no body cases, prosecuting and winning those cases. He's most famous for prosecuting the Robert Durst case. But he was on, hold on one second. He was on the John Kobylt show. And because this is so visually uninteresting, sorry, guys. Sorry, guys. Here, let's put up that while I play this. Here's his interview talking about his retaliatory transfer and his work with George Gascon and some of the things that have happened in George Gascon's office. And why this is relevant is George Gascon is the DA of Los Angeles who is reviewing the Menéndez case. It was at least what it is said that he is going to come and make a decision about releasing the Menéndez brothers. I believe that he is going to give a press conference and release the Menéndez brothers. He is up for re-election. He is down in the polls up against Nathan Hochman. I think this has been called, you heard it here, a Hail Mary pass to try to win his election by freeing these killers at the last minute. But it is certainly in line with the pro-criminal stuff that has come out of his office. Take a listen to this interview with John Lewin on the John Kobylt show. If you want to listen to the whole thing, the episode is in this, the link is in this episode's description.
There's also an excerpt on Instagram, which a lot of people have seen. That's just the first segment, though. The entire thing is on YouTube. And at John Kobylt Radio is how you can access all our social media platforms. George Gascon in the news again today. The LA Times has a story chronicling all of his deputy DAs who have sued him. He has about a dozen civil lawsuits filed by his own employees. In fact, in total, 20 prosecutors that work for him have accused Gascon of retaliation in the workplace, claiming they got pushed out of leadership positions. They were pushed into undesirable assignments because they challenged his policies or pointed out some of his orders were just flat out illegal or unethical, and they didn't want to carry them out. And we're going to talk now with John Lewin, deputy DA. You may know him most famously as the prosecutor who got the conviction against Robert Durst, featured in the HBO series The Jinx, which has been a big hit recently. Lewin was moved out of the major crimes unit and assigned to working as a calendar deputy in Inglewood. So let's talk to John for his perspective on this story out today and the upcoming election. John, welcome again.
John, great to be with you. As always, I have to relate that these are my personal opinions. They do not reflect the opinions of George Gascon or his administration. Let me tell you that finally we're in a position, it's not a dozen, it's closer to 2 dozen. And when it's over, although the LA Times and the author Quealy, who is basically functions as Gascon's personal stenographer,
James Quealy,
although he did what he could to minimize what's going on and said, well, it was $1.5 million and they haven't spent a whole lot. Let me tell you, It was $1.5 million award for Sean Randolph. Her attorneys were awarded $900,000 from the court. There were 6 attorneys on the other side. George Gascon won't say what they were paid, but I will tell you, no doubt in my mind, that case has already cost the county $5 or $6 million. There are another 20 to go, approximately.
So that's the county taxpayers have to pay $5 to $6 million just to settle this one lawsuit against Gascon from a deputy.
Well, no, that wasn't settled. He went to trial where he and his chief deputy, the ever-talented Joseph Iniguez, who had a total of 5 years of experience when he was named to the number 2 position in the office, they both testified. If they were believed, Sean would have lost. The jurors afterward were polled and discussed the case and said straight out they believe Gascon and Iniguez perjured themselves. Wow. They're liars. So George Gascon, obviously, since that case didn't go well, he also settled a case involving Richard Doyle, a very well-respected head deputy. This happened the first week.
So these are some of the cases. Lewin puts it at a couple dozen cases. I've heard 50 cases against George Gascon I mean, a couple dozens, I guess, would be 24. I've heard 50. I'll double check it. I would encourage everybody to do, but I think he's got many, many lawsuits against him. These may just be the prosecutors for retaliatory transfer or dismissal that he's done, who wouldn't go along with his pro-criminal policies and what they felt were illegal policies. And John Lewin, of course, in full disclosure, has his own lawsuit where he was transferred from the cold case unit that he built and made famous. I mean, helped build and make famous, to a calendar deputy in Englewood. And he has been, I don't think I'll play that part, but he's been sneaking back because there's so few prosecutors in the office who can prosecute cases. So Gascon has put in former defense attorneys, many with no trial experience, into the office. And if you didn't hear earlier, he's gotten rid of gun enhancements. He got rid of the entire department that notifies victims' families when their loved ones' killers are coming up for parole. This is very important. So why I'm playing this is it's very important to understand when George Gascon releases the Menéndez brothers, as to, it's not just to further his own political career, but it's part of an ideology that nobody should do more than 15 years, 20 years for any crime. This is,
Gascon's administration.
And you have to remember also that Jose and Kitty cannot be considered one crime. Right there, it's two. It's why they're serving consecutive sentences, life sentences, is because they killed 2 people. So when people say 30 years is enough, I say, so you mean 15 years for each? For 15 years for Jose and 15 years for Kitty, you're comfortable with that? And if you're going to talk about abuse, then you have to argue, of which there is zero evidence. And this is what they argued in court, that both their parents essayed them, abused them in that way.
Where Gascon pressured him to dismiss charges on the Compton train case. Richard said he wouldn't do it. He sent his lackey down to do it. And then when there was a complaint by Richard, they transferred him. They settled that for over $1 million. So we're looking at probably $100 million in settlements and fees. We won't find out about that till it's done. By the way, they also have hired outside law firms. For instance, Shepard Mullen, a very expensive law firm, has been doing an investigation on me for equity complaints filed by, among others, Tiffany Blacknell and Alyssa Blair. These are 2 former public defenders who are police and jail abolitionists. Tiffany Blacknell was famous for the LAPD Train to Kill Me shirt that she wears. So this is what Gascon is doing. And we've been...
Which is hilarious if you talk to John Lewin. One of his concerns about these pro-criminal policies is that they hurt minority communities. So it's funny to me, and poor communities, because when you release these people, that's the communities that suffer. When you reduce policing, those are the communities that suffer, the more violent communities. It's not in Beverly Hills.
Trying to get him to sit down in a deposition. In my case, I was the longest tenured member of the Major Crimes Division in the history of that unit. I was just coming off, myself and the lawyers on my team were coming off a really hard work for victory in the Durst case. Gascon gave me his Lawyer of the Year award. And then when I refused to pose for pictures with him and sent him an email saying, listen, I'm not going to do it. That would be an implicit endorsement of your policies, and I don't endorse them. And by the way, I'm afraid you're going to transfer me in retaliation. What Gascon did was, first he got caught a couple months after that through his one of his bureau directors, a guy named Larry Drager, who has gone to work for George, and there isn't anything that Larry won't do to help George implement his illegal policies. Larry ended up calling me on something completely different, and during the conversation informed me that they were talking upstairs about, quote, closing the Major Crimes Division to retaliate against myself and 2 other deputies, which is completely illegal.
Closing the whole division?
Yes, they were going to. Now, they ended up not doing that because our lawyer sent a letter, hysterically funny. Their lawyer, who now Gascon has put in charge of our Human Resources Division, he runs it. Their lawyer wrote back to the effect of, that is not true, that we are not planning on closing the Major Crimes Division. But now that you brought it up, maybe we'll take a look at it. So this is an individual, George Gascon, who has no ethics. He has no professionalism. He has no knowledge. And we want to get him to sit for a deposition. We've been trying to get him to sit for a deposition for more than a year. And George is going into stall tactics because he doesn't want to sit. Because let's face it, John, do you know how you can tell when George Gascon is lying?
How?
His lips are moving. So I want.
I mean, what an indictment of George Gascon. So we're just going to get rid of the entire Major Crimes Division. So I've seen that award ceremony where John Lewin got. I mean, it is just like, this is such a unique, special prosecutor. His incredible talents. I mean, just like one, just basically fawning all over John Lewin. And when John Lewin wouldn't be photographed with him, they're like, oh, and was speaking out, doing interviews about these policies and how illegal and unjust they were. They're like, okay, you're gonna be now the calendar clerk and calendar deputy in Englewood. You just can't do that. You can't do retaliatory transfers. Also, John McKinney, who ran for DA, I supported his candidacy. Unfortunately, he didn't make it. Hochman did. He also got transferred. He's Lewin's good friend, who also happens to be Black. But so it just cracks me up that he has some kind of equity complaints against him. I'm sure those are really real. I mean, I talked to John Lewin like I don't know, more than anyone I've ever interviewed. I mean, he would give me his time when he was walking his dog. So, and he's meant, you can, he's a human being with faults, but I would not say, I would not say that he's bigoted in any way.
That depot. I want him to sit down. Hey, George, if you're not afraid of it, let's get this deposition done and let's get to work. Let's put 12 in the box and let's have this trial. The County of Los Angeles, your constituents deserve to know the illegality of what you're doing, and not just what you've done to your employees, which is awful, but how you are going around freeing criminal after criminal after criminal, not even telling your own lawyers that you're doing it. as you're aware, last month was Diana Taran, who's number 3 in command. She's now looking at 11 felonies, still being paid apparently by George Gascon. Yesterday, Paige Knab, I think it's pronounced, the head of the Northern California Innocence Project, a person that Gascon has honored and recently dismissed a case that she was involved in. She has other cases pending. Turns out that Paige had a sexual relationship with an individual who was involved in the case as a witness and did not tell the judge.
Well, I mean, sexual, I think, I don't know how sexual it can get when, so this is hold on, let me just show you guys. This is a story that I covered on my channel. This Innocence Project lawyer, in order to get her client out, befriended another inmate who had nothing to lose by taking responsibility, as so often is the case when you see these confessions, like in the Central Park 5 case, like where one person takes responsibility and is like, nope, this other person who was convicted had nothing to do with it. It's all me. She basically flirted with him, sent him racy pictures, text messages, et cetera, all, to get him to take responsibility, offered him parts of the settlement money when they sue for a wrongful conviction. And it happened to be the biggest payout, or the second biggest payout in San Francisco history. Hold on, let me just get to the actual, so you can see which episode it is. I mean, I think it's one of the, whenever I do these stories, it's like the lowest watched thing on my channel, but I thought was one of the most fascinating. It's called Innocence Project Scandal. Hold on, you can see it here. Yeah, it's like right here. Innocence Project Scandal. Let me take down this picture so you can see. And you can see this woman just like a little bit. I was reviewing Sean's video here. Actual justice warrior, Sean Fitzgerald. Let me just see. He plays a little of her. The lawyer he's talking about. Oh, darn it. I should have had this queued up. Paige Knab. Here she is.
Way back when.
The 1619 Project by the New York Times is incredible. I think there are actually a lot of resources right now. If you look up like equity challenges, and as I mentioned, NCIP is doing this 21-day racial equity.
There she is. So she's getting reviewed by the bar for her unethical behavior, but she essentially released a guilty killer by getting a convict who is friends with the killer to confess. I mean, you can just, he spilled it all, because they often, what happens with these, when people are promised things like this, is they weren't paying out. So he got pissed and told all, and he has the receipts, and it's one little San Francisco paper that's covering it. And it's gotten no national coverage. You would think it would have been a huge scandal. But if it's getting in the way of furthering this narrative, nobody wants to hear it in our national news. Really interesting episode. I should have linked it in the description of this episode. But if you go to the live section, go down to Innocence Project Scandal, you can watch that episode. I encourage you to watch it. That's what. And Lewin also made a statement on his Facebook. I don't know if I'm Facebook friends with him, so I don't know if I'm really privy to share it. But talking about the Innocence Project and talking about how many cases are releasing guilty killers and out to push an ideology, and how dangerous it is.
We call that illegal and unethical misconduct. George loves the press releases and the press conferences, John, but we haven't heard anything about that. But trust me, every time there's a filing, George actually holds a presser as if he's the one who investigated, filed, and has prosecuted the case. The only time the man's ever seen a courtroom is as a criminal defendant. The only law books that I think he's ever read have pictures in it, and I don't even think he colors them properly.
John, can you just hold on, because we just got to do a little bit of news, and we'll get back to this, okay?
Sure.
John Lewin, he's a very successful LA County DA prosecutor, was the winner in the Robert Durst case, and John is suing along with a lot of other George Gascon employees, deputy DAs, for the way Gascon has retaliated against them. We'll continue next.
You're listening to John Kobylt on demand from KFI AM 640.
We continue with being pushed out of leadership positions because they question the legality or ethics of the policies he tried to impose. One of them here is John Lewin, who we're talking to, who won the conviction against Robert Durst and featured in the HBO documentary The Jinx, which I'm being told is fascinating. And you came off really well. I guess they shot you in real time as you were trying to corner Durst.
The key is very bad lighting, where you can't really see me. I want to add, John, that what is so important is that it's not that Gascon's policies are adversely impacting his employees. They absolutely are. But what has started these lawsuits are people standing up and saying, no, I am not going to go into court and lie to a judge so that George Gascon and the public defenders he has brought in to literally re-sentence death penalty defendants. Cases, the worst cases that we've tried in this office, they go into court, they don't even notify the trial deputies. They work hand in hand with the defense lawyers. At times, they've been caught literally filing papers allegedly written by the ex-public defender, now DA, that were...
See, that's what happened with Adnan Syed case. They filed papers, meaning the prosecutor's office filed papers written by the Innocence Project class. You can see it. I mean, if you read a lot of court documents, you just know. You're like, what the heck what is up? I mean, this is barely literate, barely literate, this filing to release Adnan Syed. They just use the Innocence Project filing to release him because there's just two wings of the defense now. So did everybody just hear what he said? They're undoing death penalty cases. And he's like, unbeknownst to the original prosecutors, because he's got former public defenders working as prosecutors in his office, and they just want these people out. I mean, we need an adversarial system. We cannot have, I mean, if we create, so if John Lewin quit and became and a bunch of other former prosecutors quit and became defense attorneys and got in and we're like, we're just going to all represent clients against their best interest. It would have been a huge scandal. So they get longer sentences, they get convicted, and we're just going to get more people locked up. It would have been the biggest scandal. We never hear the end of it in our media. But because we have a bunch of former defense attorneys doing exactly that on the other side, working for the criminal's best interest, not representing the victim or representing the people, it's word one. And if you ever say Soros DA, even to my boyfriend, he's like, I don't like it when you say Soros DA. It just happens to be true. Do I need to play it for the seventh time? It happens to be his money that and his from his and George Gascon's brain to think of such a sinister plot. I mean, it's really like Dr. Evil, James Bond villain territory we're in here.
Actually written by the defense. They come into court and they're asking to reduce these cases to what are called non-death, non-LWOP cases, meaning X to life. And what's interesting is George will come back and say, well, now this guy's still going to do 200 years to life. But it's a lie, John, because as George knows, in legislation he supported, Once you are age 50 and have served 20 years, you are eligible for elder parole. And George Gascon has said nobody should serve more than 15 years without a resentencing hearing.
Right. See, nobody should serve more than 15 years. It's not even 20 years. There's a whole movement to cap sentences at 20 years. Now it's 15. And in New York, we passed a horrible bill called the Clean Slate Act, where if you're above 50, I believe, it's the same kind of thing. All this horrible stuff like gets imported from California, and then all our horrible ideas from America get imported to the UK. It seems like the UK, though, does not have this, like, it has innocence fraud, but not at the same level. And they're working, because right now, though they're working to undo this, they don't have civil payouts like in the millions like we do. So there's so much financial incentive. And even to really get a lawyer to really talk about this movement the way it is near impossible, because they all work with these lawyers and are friends with these lawyers and know someone who's profiting from it. So they represent their client to get their client's conviction undone. Once it's undone, they say, look, my client was released. And in the public's mind, any release is an exoneration. And then they go to our civil courts and sue for wrongful conviction. That's how this innocence fraud movement works. It is a money machine. Never mind the money that's made to make these release these killers documentaries and podcasts. So it really makes me laugh when my critics say, like, oh, she's just out for the money. There is no money on this side of the issue. I'll tell you that. The money is all on the side of free these poor innocent angel killers who didn't do anything. That's where the money is.
Now, Sean Randolph, who won the case, tried to get George to testify, and they stalled and delayed. They took writs. George never sat for a deposition in that case, because in the end, Sean's choice was either start the trial or have it delayed even more. Now, the problem in my case is we've been trying to get him to sit for more than a year, and he is intimately involved in my case because he and his upper administration transferred me out of my assignment because I refused to support his illegal conduct, because I refused to walk into court and to betray my oath as a deputy district attorney. And they deliberately retaliated against me in an incredibly obvious way. And George does not want to come in and be deposed. They are very afraid of what's going to happen, and they should be afraid.
But eventually he's going to have to. He can't escape the deposition forever.
Well, he'll try, and they've done that so far. I have very good lawyers. I am extremely dedicated to getting to the bottom of this. I want to just add that I went on a
Okay. So that'll give you an idea of what's going on there. Also, I don't know if you heard him mention DSamlam. There's also this scandal in George Gascon's office.
Our NBC4i team has learned about criminal charges filed by the California Attorney General against a top member of the LA County District Attorney's Office. We've seen her in online news conferences like this one, but she's not well known to the public. DSamlam is a former public defender who moved to the LA County Sheriff's Department and then to the DA's office, where she now serves as head of ethics and integrity. The Attorney General alleges she obtained confidential information about local police officers while she was working at the Sheriff's Department, and then improperly used that information to bring criminal charges against them. We reached out to District Attorney George Gascon for comment.
So the ethics officer in George Gascon's office used her access to police information and then went on a war against the police, charging them with all sorts of unethical behavior. She's the ethics officer. She's got, I don't know how many charges against her. It's like, hold on, let me look while I'm here. Let me pull it up on the fly, DSamlam. I mean, that'll tell you this is the caliber of people working in George Gascon's office. So, when I hear Mark Garrigo say a few people oppose the release of the Menéndez brothers, I mean, how are those people working in his office? So just in June, judge unseals Department of Justice affidavit in Diana TerN's case. It says an LA Superior Court has unsealed top district attorney, top advisor to District Attorney George Gascon's her arrest affidavit. The unsealed affidavit undermines Benita's claim that she used a legal, confidential disciplinary records of 11 deputies to charge them with different crimes. And so that was a huge scandal. And they've had felony charges filed against her. So she's 11 felony violations of Penal Code 502, alleging repeated and unauthorized use of data from confidential statutory protected police officers' files. So that's also another element that I've talked about on this show when I've interviewed Martin Pribe, who's a police officer and writer, how a lot of this is criminalizing the police. That's a whole nother subject. Dissent decrees. I mean, this subject is so huge.
He said, in part, I remain committed to upholding transparency and ensuring police accountability within LA County. We will address this matter with the utmost seriousness and diligence to uphold the values of justice and fairness.
Okay, so that is what I have for today. I think we've been going for 2 hours. But if you're in Los Angeles, please do your own research and find out exactly what George Gascon is up to, and evaluate and listen to Nathan Hochman. They just recently did a debate, so you can hear the difference in those two candidates. And certainly, to me, the move that really says everything that he's about to me is the getting rid of the victims, the department that notifies victims' families when their loved one's killer is up for parole. That says everything to me about his ethics and who he is. So that's what I have for today. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, support the channel by becoming a patron, buy me a coffee, send me a donation by Venmo, and I will be back with more true crime content very soon at 6 p.m. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for listening.